she returned to Sicily for one final goodbye, never expecting to come face to face with the man whose heart she had broken 10 years earlier. He believed she abandoned him. She believed leaving was the only way to save their child. Neither of them knew that the real enemy had been standing beside them all along. You are listening to a story exclusively narrated on the Dark Romance Stories channel. Relax and step into the world of love stories filled with mystery, emotions, and passion. Don't forget to like, subscribe to the channel, and leave a comment to support us. This content is the property of Dark Romance Stories. Please do not copy or re-upload it in any form.
Hoặc nếu muốn mở đầu mạnh hơn để tăng khả năng giữ chân người xem trong 15 giây đầu.
The letter arrived on a Tuesday, and by Wednesday, Teresa Marchetti had stopped pretending she could ignore it. She stood on the stone terrace of the villa outside Cefalù, the Tyrrhenian Sea spread out below her like hammered silver, and read the 3 lines again. Your father is dying. He asks for you. Come home before it is too late. No signature. It did not need one. Only one family used that particular cream paper, embossed with a crest that had been paying for silence in New York for 60 years. Mama? She turned. Matteo stood in the doorway, 9 years old, all elbows and dark eyes that belonged to a man she had spent a decade trying not to dream about. He had Vincent's mouth. He had Vincent's way of watching a room before he entered it.
Some mornings she could barely look at him without her chest folding in on itself. Nothing, amore, she said, folding the letter fast. Grandpapa's friends. Grown-up things. You went white. I did not. She crossed the terrace and pressed her lips to his hair, breathing in salt and sun and the boy's smell of him. Go finish your lessons. Signora Bruno will scold us both. He went, but slowly, glancing back once with that unsettling adult calm. When he was gone, she gripped the balustrade until her knuckles ached. 10 years. 10 years she had built between herself and that world. The ocean, the language she'd relearned, the fake surname, the small, quiet life where nobody knew that Matteo Marchetti was really Matteo Castellano, heir to the most dangerous name on the eastern seaboard. 10 years of looking over her shoulder in markets, of teaching her son to lie about where he came from, of loving him so fiercely it frightened her. And now her father, Don Alberto, who had smuggled her out of the country the night everything fell apart, who had never once asked her to explain the tears. Her father was dying, and he was dying in New York, in the very center of the storm she had fled. She could refuse. She could stay here, safe, and let the old man go into the dark without her hand in his. She knew she would not. That was the trouble with love. It never let you choose the coward's road cleanly. Teresa went inside. She packed 2 suitcases, one for herself, one for the boy, and she did not let herself think about the man waiting on the other side of the water, the man who believed she had walked out of his bed and his life without a word. The man who, if the stories that still trickled across the ocean were true, had spent 10 years turning himself into something cold and merciless and untouchable. Vincent Castellano. The Ice King of Manhattan, they called him now. She had known him before the ice. She had known him warm, The flight was long, and the boy slept against her shoulder. She watched the dark Atlantic slide by beneath them and rehearsed the story she would tell. Matteo is my sister's child. Matteo is adopted. Matteo is none of your business. Each lie tasted worse than the last, because the truth had teeth. The moment Vincent looked at that boy's face, he would know. There was no hiding a son from a father who owned half the mirrors in the city. They landed at dusk. A car was waiting, black, armoured, driven by a man she half recognised from the old days, older now, greyer, his eyes flicking to the boy and away with careful discipline. "Signorina Marchetti," he said, "the Don is at the Long Island house. He's holding on. For you, I think." "Thank you, Enzo." She remembered the name a beat late. "You've stayed with him all this time?" "Somebody had to." He held the door. "The city changed while you were gone, Signorina. Be careful who you smile at." They drove out of the airport and onto the expressway, and Manhattan rose in the distance like a wall of cold light, and Teresa felt the old fear wake up in her belly and stretch. Matteo pressed his face to the window. "It's so big," he breathed. "Bigger than Palermo." "Bigger than everything," she murmured. "Stay close to me here. Promise me. Whatever happens, whoever talks to you, you stay close." "I promise, Mama." He said it easily, the way children promise things they don't understand. She held his hand the rest of the way and prayed to a God she'd mostly stopped believing in, that she could keep him hidden long enough to bury her father and get out again. She did not know, could not have known, that a man in a penthouse 40 floors above the river had already been told a Marchetti car had crossed into the city. She did not know that Vincent Castellano was standing at his window with a glass of something amber and untouched, staring south, his jaw a hard line, his heart doing something it had refused to do for 10 years. She did not know that the moment her name reached him, he had said one word to the room full of men who worked for him: "Find her." The Long Island house was ablaze with light when they arrived. Nurses moved through the halls in soft shoes. Her father's oldest friends stood in the drawing room in their dark suits, murmuring, and they went silent when she came in. This woman they remembered as a girl, returned with a child at her hip and grief already carving her face. Teresa. Her father's voice was a thread. She went to the bedroom, to the bed where the great Don Alberto had shrunk to something small and grey, and she fell to her knees beside him and took his cold hand. "Papa, I'm here. I'm here." His eyes found her, then drifted past her, to the doorway, to the boy standing there uncertain, and something crossed the dying man's face that might have been fear or might have been an apology. "You brought him," Alberto whispered. "You brought him here." "I had no one to leave him with." "Teresa." His fingers tightened with a strength that surprised her. "He knows. Vincent. He knows you're back. It took him 1 hour. A wet, rattling breath. "You cannot hide the boy. Not here. Not from him." "Then I won't hide," she said, and was surprised to find she meant it. "Rest, Papa. We'll talk when you're stronger." But they both knew there would be no stronger, and somewhere in the city a car was already pulling out of an underground garage, headlights cutting the night, carrying a cold man toward the woman he had never stopped wanting. He came at midnight. Teresa was in the kitchen, making coffee she wouldn't drink, when she heard the cars. More than one, engines low and expensive. And then the front door opening without a knock, because men like Vincent Castellano did not knock at houses that belonged to their allies. She set the cup down very carefully so it would not shatter, and turned, and there he was. 10 years had done to him what 10 years does to a blade that is used every day. He was harder, leaner through the face, broader through the shoulders, dressed in charcoal so dark it drank the light. His black hair was cut short and severe now, threaded with the first silver at the temples. But it was the eyes that undid her. Those pale grey eyes she had once watched go soft in the dark, now flat and cold as a frozen lake, fixed on her with an intensity that made the air in the room go thin. Teresa. Her name in his mouth. He said it like an accusation, like a wound he'd been nursing for a decade. Vincent. She was proud of how level she kept it. You didn't waste time. You've had 10 years of my time. He stepped into the kitchen, and the two men behind him stayed in the hall, and the space that had felt large suddenly felt like a box closing. I've had 10 years of silence, so no, I didn't waste any more of it. They stood 3 feet apart. She could smell his cologne, the same one, God help her, cedar and something darker, and it went straight through the decade like it had never happened. My father is dying, she said. That's why I'm here. Only that. I know why you're here. His gaze moved over her. Slow, deliberate, possessive in a way that made her skin heat and her spine stiffen at once. I know everything that happens in this city. I knew your plane's tail number before it landed. I knew what you were wearing before you got in the car. A muscle ticked in his jaw. What I don't know, what I have never known, is why you left. There it was, the question that had chased her across an ocean. Vincent, you were in my bed. His voice dropped, and it was worse quiet than it would have been loud. You told me you loved me. You wore my ring in your pocket because you were afraid to wear it on your hand. And then, one morning, you were gone. No note, no word. Your father told me you'd chosen to leave, and that if I was a man, I'd respect it. He took a step closer, and she made herself not retreat. Do you have any idea what that did to me? She did. She could see it in every hard line of him. The warmth she had loved had been burned down to fuel something else, something that had made him the most feared man in 5 boroughs. I had reasons, she said, reasons I couldn't tell you then and can barely tell you now. Try. I can't. Not yet, not until... She stopped, because footsteps were coming down the stairs, small bare feet on old wood, and her heart dropped straight through the floor. Mama, I couldn't sleep. The house is making noises. Matteo appeared in the doorway in his pyjamas, hair mussed, and stopped dead when he saw the tall stranger. And Vincent turned. She watched it happen. She watched the great Ice King of Manhattan look at the boy's face, at his own mouth, his own eyes, his own way of standing, and she watched something crack in that frozen surface, some vast and silent thing splitting open. Vincent went absolutely still. His glass would have fallen if he'd been holding one. His face did not move, but his eyes were suddenly, terribly alive. Teresa. His voice had changed completely, raw, barely there. How old is he? Vincent, how old is he? 9, she whispered. He's 9. The number landed in the room like a body. 9 years, 10 months since she'd left, near enough. He did the arithmetic she could see him doing, and every calculation led to the same place, and his hand came up and gripped the doorframe hard enough to whiten the knuckles. "Get out," he said, and for a wild second she thought he meant her. But he was speaking to his men in the hall, low and lethal. "All of you, wait in the cars. Now." They went. Matteo looked between the two adults, sensing the current in the room without understanding it. "Mama, who is he?" Teresa opened her mouth. No sound came. Vincent crouched, slowly, the way you'd approach a wild thing, until he was level with the boy. When he spoke, his voice was gentler than she had ever imagined it could still be. "What's your name?" "Matteo." "Matteo." He said it like he was tasting something he'd been starved of. "That's a strong name. Do you know what it means?" The boy shook his head. "Gift of God." Vincent's throat worked. "Go back to bed, Matteo. Your mother and I have to talk. Grown-up things." He glanced up at Teresa, and the look he gave her was not cold at all now. It was devastation and fury and something so close to love it hurt to see. "We have a great deal to talk about." When the boy had gone, the two of them stood in the wreckage of 10 years of lies, and Vincent straightened to his full height, and the ice came back over his eyes like a door closing. "He's mine," he said. It was not a question. "Yes." "You took my son." Each word a shard. "You took my son. And you hid him across an ocean for 9 years, and you let me believe." He stopped, breathed. When he spoke again, it was the deadliest calm she had ever heard. "Someone is going to answer for this, Teresa. Every single person who kept this from me. And you are going to start by telling me the truth. All of it. Tonight." They talked in her father's study, behind a closed door, with a bottle of grappa between them that neither touched at first. "Start at the beginning," Vincent said. He had taken the chair across from her, not beside her, and the distance was deliberate. "The last night. What happened after I fell asleep?" Teresa wrapped her hands around a glass for something to hold. "Someone came to me," she said. "Late. You were exhausted. You'd been up 3 nights with the Genovese trouble. You slept like the dead. Someone knocked on the terrace door of the penthouse. Someone with a key to the private elevator." She looked up. "Only 3 people had that key, Vincent." His eyes narrowed. "You, me, and don't." She held up a hand. "Let me finish, because I've been carrying this for 10 years, and if I don't say it all now, I never will." She took a breath. "It was a man. He told me things. He told me you were already promised, that the commission had arranged a marriage to bind the families, that it was decided, that a girl like me, no name, no blood, no dowry, was a liability that would get me killed the moment the deal closed. And then Her voice caught. Then he told me I was pregnant. Vincent went still. You didn't know? I suspected. I hadn't told anyone. I'd barely told myself. A tear escaped, and she wiped it angrily away. And he knew, Vincent. He'd had a doctor look at my blood work. The checkup I'd had 2 days before. I don't even know how he got it. He knew before I did. And he sat there in the dark, and he told me that if I stayed, if I had your child, they would use the baby against you. That an heir born to a woman with no protection was a weakness your enemies would carve out of you. That the kindest thing I could do, the only loving thing, was to disappear and take the child somewhere no one would ever look. And you believed him? Vincent's voice was terrible. I was 22 years old. I was pregnant and terrified, and the man who told me this was someone I trusted almost as much as I trusted you. She met his eyes. He gave me proof, documents, a copy of the marriage contract with your name on it, and a seal I recognized. He gave me money and a name and a road out. And he swore on his mother's grave that if I ever came back, if I ever told you, they would find the baby and they would kill it to send you a message. The silence stretched. The marriage, Vincent said slowly. There was a proposal. The commission floated it. I refused it inside a week. I told them there was only one woman I would ever marry, and she was already carrying my ring in her pocket. His jaw flexed. That was 3 days after you left. The contract you saw was real, Teresa, but it was dead almost before the ink dried. Someone showed you a corpse and told you it was alive. She closed her eyes. 10 years. 10 years of exile, built on a lie she'd been too frightened to check. Who? Vincent said. You said 3 people had the elevator key. Say the name. He wore a mask that night. Half a mask, a scarf. I never saw his whole face. But his voice, his hands, the ring on his hand. She looked up, and the name was ash in her mouth. It was someone close to you, someone who knew the penthouse, the codes, my blood work, the commission's business. Someone who had everything to gain if you had no heir and no woman to steady you. Vincent had gone very white beneath his tan, because there was only one man that described. One man who had been at his right hand for 15 years, who had risen beside him, who called himself Vincent's brother in all but blood. Say his name, Vincent whispered, though he already knew. I can't prove it, not yet, but in my heart, say it. Salvatore, she breathed. Salvatore Ruggiero, your consigliere, your best friend. She watched the words go into him like knives. The man who orchestrated everything. The man who has spent 10 years, 3 steps from your throne, waiting for you to have no son to leave it to. For a long moment, Vincent did not move. Then he rose, walked to the window, and stood looking out at the dark lawn, his shoulders rigid. If you're wrong, he said, I lose the only man I've ever fully trusted. And if you're right, his reflection in the glass met her eyes. If you're right, then he took 9 years of my son from me, and he made you into a ghost, and he did it smiling in my face every single day. His voice dropped to nothing. I will burn him alive. We have no proof. Then we get proof. He turned, and now the cold was gone, and something hotter had replaced it. Purpose and rage, and underneath it, tangled and unwilling, the old thing between them that 10 years had not killed. You and I, together, we say nothing. We let him believe he's won, and we find the thread that unravels him. He crossed the room in 3 strides and stopped close, too close, close enough that she had to tip her head back to hold his gaze. But understand me, Teresa, whatever we were, whatever we might be again, that's a separate war. First, we take back my son. First, we bury the man who took him. Are you with me? She should have said she needed time. She should have said 100 careful things. Yes, she said. God help me. Yes. Salvatore Ruggiero came to the Long Island house the next morning, and Teresa nearly gave everything away in the first 3 seconds. He was handsome in the way of a man who has never gone hungry. Silver at the temples, a tailored coat, a smile that reached exactly as far as it needed to, and no farther. He crossed the drawing-room with both hands outstretched, and she made herself take them. Teresa, piccola Teresa, all grown up. He kissed both her cheeks, and his cologne was in her nose, and it was not the cologne from that night, but the hands were the hands, and the ring, the heavy gold signet with the worn crest, was the ring, and her stomach turned over. The city has been dark without you. Vincent has been, well, you know what he's been. I heard he'd changed, she managed. He froze. Salvatore's smile turned rueful, confiding, perfect. The night you left, something in him just stopped. I've spent 10 years trying to warm the man back up. He pressed a hand to his heart. And here you are, the one thing that might do it. God works in strange ways. You God-fearing snake, she thought, and smiled, and offered him coffee. Vincent came in then, and Teresa watched the performance begin. Watched the man she'd spent one night unmasking a decade ago sling an arm around Salvatore's shoulders and call him fratello. Watched him laugh at something the older man said. Watched him hide a fury vast enough to level the house behind a face of easy warmth. It was terrifying how good Vincent was at it. She had never seen this version of him, the actor, the ice made pleasant. She understood suddenly how he had survived 10 years at the top of a mountain of knives. "You've met my son, then," Vincent said lightly, pouring himself coffee. "Matteo." Teresa's heart stopped. Salvatore's cup paused a half-inch from his lips. Just a half-inch, just for a half-second. But she was watching for it, and she saw it, the flicker, the recalculation, the tiny betraying stillness of a man whose carefully built world has just cracked. "Your son," Salvatore said, "Teresa's boy." Vincent sipped, casual as anything, his eyes never leaving his consigliere's face. 9 years old, sharp as a blade. Looks just like his mother, don't you think? A beat. Family's the whole point of everything we do, isn't it, Sal? Everything I've built, who's it for, if not for blood? Of course, Salvatore said. He had recovered, smooth again, warm again, but Teresa had seen underneath, and so, she knew, had Vincent. Blood is everything. It is. Vincent set down his cup. Which is why I want the boy protected, guarded. Nothing happens to that child while he's in my city, Sal.
I'm making you personally responsible. It was a brilliant, brutal move, and Teresa nearly gasped at it. Vincent had just handed the wolf the lamb, and in doing so had made it impossible for Salvatore to harm Matteo without every suspicion falling squarely on him. "I'll guard him with my life," Salvatore said, and his smile was flawless, and Teresa thought, he means the opposite of every word. Later, when Salvatore had gone, Vincent found her on the terrace, and for a moment the mask dropped, and she saw the exhaustion of it. "You saw," he said. It wasn't a question. "The cup, when you said son." "The cup," Vincent agreed. 15 years I've known that man. 15 years I'd have bet my life on him." His hands tightened on the railing. "I still can't fully believe it. There's a part of me screaming that we're wrong, that we've built a monster out of a coincidence and a bad memory." He looked at her. "Convince me. Give me one more thing." "His ring," she said. "The gold signet. He wore it that night. I saw it in the dark when he handed me the documents. Vincent, I dreamed about that ring for years. I'd know it anywhere." Half the old families wear signets. With a chip out of the left edge of the crest. A flaw from where his grandfathers got caught in a car door in 1974. He told me that story once, laughing, when I was 17. She turned to face him fully. "I'm not building a monster. I'm remembering one." Vincent was quiet a long moment. Then he nodded, once, and something settled in his face. The last of the doubt burning off, leaving only the cold, clear purpose beneath. "All right," he said. "Then here's how it goes. We give him rope. We let him think you're broken and I'm distracted playing father. We watch where he moves, who he calls, what he tries." He paused. "And we protect the boy every hour of every day, because a cornered man does desperate things, and right now the most dangerous thing in this city to Salvatore Ruggiero is a 9-year-old with my face." "Vincent," she caught his sleeve, "if he even suspects Matteo is really, he won't touch him." Vincent's voice went to that lethal quiet she was learning to fear and trust in equal measure. "I will put 12 men around that boy. I will put myself around that boy. Nobody takes anything from me ever again." He looked down at her hand on his arm, and something flickered. Heat, memory, hunger, before he stepped back out of reach. "Get some sleep. Tomorrow we start hunting." Vincent came back the next afternoon, and this time he came for Matteo. Teresa had spent the morning trying to decide how to tell the boy, "That man is your father, the man you've never had, the man I told you died before you were born," and had found no words that didn't feel like a grenade with the pin already pulled. So when Vincent's car came up the drive, she simply took Matteo's hand and led him to the front steps. "Matteo," she said, "the man who's coming, I need to tell you something about him, and I need you to be brave." But Vincent, unfolding from the car in a dark sweater and no tie, the least armoured she'd seen him, held up a hand as he climbed the steps. "May I?" he asked her quietly. She hesitated, then nodded. Vincent crouched again, level with the boy, the way he had that first night. "Matteo, do you know how to skip a stone?" The boy blinked. "Skip a... you mean on water?"
There's a pond behind the house. I used to skip stones on it when I was your age. Your grandfather, Alberto, taught me. Vincent's voice was steady and warm and utterly focused, and Teresa realized he'd decided not to detonate the grenade at all. Not yet. Not with words. But to build the thing first, brick by brick, before he ever named it. I bet I can get 7 skips. I bet you can't beat me. Matteo's chin came up, that flash of competitive fire, so exactly his father's, that Teresa's breath caught. I bet I can. Prove it. And just like that, they were walking down toward the water together. The great cold dawn of Manhattan, and the boy he'd learnt 3 days ago he had. And Teresa stood on the steps with her hand pressed to her mouth and watched them go. And she did not know if what she felt was terror or relief, or the beginning of something she had abandoned all hope of. She watched from the terrace for an hour. She watched Vincent show the boy how to angle his wrist. She watched Matteo's stone skip 4 times and heard his shout of triumph carry up the lawn. She watched Vincent laugh, actually laugh, head tipped back, a sound she hadn't heard in 10 years. And she watched him ruffle the boy's hair, and she watched Matteo let him, this child who was slow to trust anyone. When they came back up, wet to the knees and grinning, Vincent's eyes found hers over the boy's head, and in them was a message that needed no words. I will never let him go now. You understand that. There is no version of the future where I walk away from this child. She understood. She had always understood. It was why she'd been so afraid to come back. That night, after Matteo was asleep, Vincent stayed. They sat in the study again, and this time the distance between the chairs had shrunk without either of them deciding it should. He's brilliant, Vincent said. His voice was rough. Do you know what he asked me? He asked why the pond doesn't freeze in the middle, even when the edges do. He'd been thinking about it. A 9-year-old, thinking about thermal layers because he watched ice form. He shook his head, wondering. You raised him alone, in hiding, and he came out like that. I had help. My father sent money through channels. There was a woman, Signora Bruno. You raised him alone, Vincent repeated, and the way he said it was almost an accusation and almost an apology and almost underneath, something like awe. 9 years I should have been there. First words, first steps, his first day of school. Each item a fresh cut. I'll never get those back. Do you understand what you took? Every day, she whispered. Every single day, I understood. He stood abruptly and crossed to the window, and she followed, drawn against her better judgment, until they stood side by side, looking out at the dark. Their reflections hovered in the glass, the cold king and the woman who'd run from him. And for a moment, neither spoke. I hated you, Vincent said. For 10 years. I built the hate like a house, and I lived in it. It kept me warm. He turned his head. And then you walk back in with our son's hand in yours, and I find out the house was built on a lie somebody else told. And now I don't know where to put any of it. His hand rose, slowly, and touched her jaw. The barest brush, calloused fingers against her skin, and she felt it everywhere. I should still hate you. It would be so much simpler. Vincent. Her voice shook. You know what the worst part is? His thumb traced her cheekbone. His eyes had gone dark and hungry and unbearably tender. 10 years of ice, and one look at you, and it's all still there. Every bit of it. Like I never stopped. He leaned in. She felt his breath, cedar and warmth, and her eyes fluttered closed. And he stopped. Pulled back. Dropped his hand. "No," he said, and his voice was raw. "Not like this. Not while there's a snake in my house and a war to win. When I have you again, Teresa, and I will have you again, there will be nothing between us. No lies, no traitors, no ocean. Nothing." He stepped back, and the ice reassembled over his face. But she'd seen the fire under it now, and she'd never unsee it. "Good night." He left her standing at the window, her heart slamming, her lips still parted for a kiss that hadn't come, wanting him with a force that scared her more than any gun in the city. The problem with hunting a man like Salvatore Ruggiero was that he never stopped smiling. For a week, Vincent moved through the machinery of the family as if nothing had changed. Meetings in the back of the club, deals in the penthouse, the endless, careful diplomacy of men who could have each other killed with a phone call. And at his side, always, was Salvatore, laughing, advising, refilling glasses, playing the loyal brother with a mastery that made Teresa's skin crawl whenever she was forced to be in the same room. But cracks were beginning to show if you knew where to look, and Teresa, who had once loved this world before it broke her, knew exactly where to look. She found the first crack in a woman named Aurora. Aurora ran the nightclub, Eclise, the family's crown jewel, a cathedral of black marble and gold light, where politicians rubbed shoulders with killers and nobody remembered anything in the morning. She was in her 40s, elegant as a blade, and she had known Teresa when Teresa was a girl running messages for Don Alberto. "You came back," Aurora said, when Teresa came to the club on a slow Tuesday afternoon while the cleaners moved through the empty floor. "Braver than I gave you credit for. Or stupider." She poured 2 glasses of wine without asking. "Which is it?" "My father's dying." "I heard." Aurora's face softened a fraction. "Alberto was good to me once. I'm sorry." She slid a glass across the bar. "But that's not the only reason you're here, sitting in my club on a dead afternoon when you could be at his bedside. You want something." Teresa had rehearsed this. She'd chosen Aurora carefully. A woman outside the male hierarchy, a woman who saw everything and owed Salvatore nothing. "I want to know about the night I left," she said, 10 years ago. "I want to know who moved money that week, who took a trip out of the city, who paid for a doctor to look at blood work that wasn't theirs to see." She met Aurora's eyes. "You keep the books nobody's supposed to see, Aurora. You always did. I'm asking you to remember." For a long moment, Aurora said nothing. She sipped her wine. She looked at Teresa with the flat, assessing gaze of a woman deciding how much a truth would cost her. "You're chasing Ruggiero," she said finally. Not a question. Teresa's blood went cold. "I didn't say that. You didn't have to. There's only one man that list of questions leads to." Aurora set down her glass. "And if you're chasing him, then either you're going to win, in which case being your friend is the smartest thing I ever did, or you're going to lose, in which case I'll be dead in a ditch for having this conversation." She smiled thinly. "You always did put people in impossible positions, Teresa. even as a girl. Aurora, please. The older woman studied her a long moment more. Then she reached beneath the bar and came up with a small leather notebook, worn soft with handling. I keep 2 sets of books, she said. The ones the accountants see, and the ones I keep for myself, because a woman in this world survives on what she knows. She didn't open it. She held it, tapping the cover. 10 years ago, the week you vanished, a payment went out of the club's laundry account. 50,000 cash to a private clinic in New Jersey. Authorized by a signature I've never been able to explain, because officially that account was frozen that month. Tap, tap. And 3 days later, a man I'd never seen before came to collect an envelope Salvatore left behind the bar for him. The man had a car with Pennsylvania plates and a Sicilian accent, and I never saw him again. She finally looked up. The clinic did blood work, Teresa, and it wasn't for anybody in the family that I could ever find. Teresa's hands were shaking. It was my blood work. I figured that out about 4 seconds ago, watching your face. Aurora's voice was gentle now, and terrible. He had your blood tested. He knew you were carrying before you did. And then he paid a stranger to make you disappear. She slid the notebook back beneath the bar. That's not proof a court would take, but it's proof enough for men like the ones you're dealing with. The question is whether you're strong enough to use it. Will you testify? To Vincent, to the commission, if it comes to that? Aurora laughed, low and mirthless. Testify. What a sweet American word. She shook her head. I'll give you the ledger. I'll give you the clinic's name. But I was never here, and this conversation never happened. And if Ruggiero's men come asking, I'll swear on my mother you're a lying whore who came in drunk. That's the deal. That's the only deal there is. She held out her hand. Take it or leave it. Teresa took it. The woman's grip was firm and cold. One more thing, Aurora said, not letting go. You should know, Salvatore comes here every Thursday. Private room, top floor. Always the same men, except once a month there's a new one. Someone from outside the family, someone who arrives in a car with tinted windows and leaves before dawn. Her eyes glittered. If you want to know who Ruggiero's really working for, who's been funding his patients all these years, you watch that Thursday room. Because a man doesn't wait 10 years to take a throne unless somebody's paying him to be patient. The words landed in Teresa's chest like a stone dropped down a well, because it had never occurred to her, not once in 10 years, that Salvatore might not be acting alone. Someone else, Vincent said. You're telling me Ruggiero has a partner? They were in the penthouse, his penthouse, the one she'd fled 10 years ago, and walking back into it had nearly broken her. The same view of the river, the same terrace door, the same private elevator that a masked man had once ridden up to end her life as she'd known it. Vincent had watched her go pale in the doorway and had said nothing, only put a hand at the small of her back and guided her in, and the warmth of it through her dress had steadied her more than she wanted to admit. Aurora thinks so, Teresa said. A man who comes once a month, outside the family, tinted windows, gone before dawn. She turned from the view. Vincent, what if this was never just about Salvatore wanting your chair? What if someone's been using him? Someone bigger? Vincent's face had gone very still. He crossed to the bar, poured
poured 2 fingers of scotch, and stood, turning the glass without drinking.
"There are 5 families on the commission," he said slowly. "When my father died and I took the seat, I was young, 26. Some of the old men thought I'd be easy to control. When I wasn't," he set the glass down, "when I wasn't, they'd have looked for another way in. A patient way, a crack in my house they could widen over years." His jaw tightened. "A right hand who resented living in my shadow would be exactly the crack they'd choose." "So we don't just have to expose Salvatore," Teresa said. "We have to find out who's behind him. Because if we take him down and the man paying him is still out there, he finds another Salvatore." Vincent nodded grimly.
And we're back where we started, except now they know we know.
He looked at her, and something in his expression shifted, a flicker of the old warmth breaking through the strategy.
"You did this in an afternoon. 10 years I've been sitting on top of this thing, and you crack it open in an afternoon at a bar." "I know where the bodies are buried in this world," she said. "I grew up here. I just—" She looked away. "I forgot I could still be useful. In Sicily I was just Matteo's mother, just a woman by the sea." "You were never just anything." He said it fiercely, and the intensity of it made her look back at him. He'd moved closer without her noticing. He had a way of doing that, of closing distance like a tide. "That's what he took from me, Teresa. Not only the years. He took you, this you, the one who thinks 3 moves ahead, the one who walks into a lion's den and comes out with the map. He turned you into a woman hiding by the sea, and he turned me into a block of ice, and he did it in one night, and he's been laughing at both of us for 10 years. His hand came up, and this time it didn't stop at her jaw. It slid into her hair, cupping the back of her head, tilting her face up to his. "I want it back. All of it. Everything he stole." "Vincent." "Thursday," he said, and stepped back before the moment could pull them under, though his breathing had gone uneven. "You said Ruggiero holds court Thursday nights, top floor of Ecclese. I want eyes in that room. Not my men. He knows all my men. He'd smell them in a second." He began to pace, the strategist taking over.
It has to be someone he'd never suspect, someone with a reason to be in the club, invisible, part of the furniture. "Aurora," Teresa said. "Aurora won't risk it. You said so yourself." He stopped, turned, and she saw the idea arrive in his eyes, and she knew what he was going to say before he said it, and she hated it. "It has to be you." "Me? He knows my face better than anyone. He knows Teresa Marchetti, the girl who ran, the broken woman who came home to bury her father." Vincent's gaze sharpened. "He does not know Teresa Marchetti working the floor of Ecclese. If Aurora puts you behind the bar on the private level, an old friend back in the city, needing work, nothing suspicious, you become invisible. A woman pouring drinks. Men like Salvatore don't see the help. They never have. They'll talk in front of you like you're a lamp. It was insane. It was also, she realized with a sinking heart, exactly right. She'd spent 10 years being invisible. She was very, very good at it. "If he recognizes me," she said, "he doesn't just kill me. He knows the truth is out. He knows about Matteo. He goes for the boy." "He won't get near the boy." Vincent's voice dropped to iron. "Matteo doesn't leave this building without 4 of my men and me. I've had the penthouse turned into a fortress. You'll see. Bulletproof glass, biometric locks, a safe room that could survive a siege.
He took her hands in both of his, and his were warm and sure. I would put my own body between that child and a bullet without a single thought, Teresa.
Believe that if you believe nothing else about me anymore. She looked at their joined hands, at the man she'd run from, offering to die for the son she'd hidden from him. I believe it, she whispered. Then do this with me. His thumbs moved over her knuckles. One night, you listen, you watch, you tell me who walks into that Thursday room, and then we take the whole rotten structure down together, you and me, and we get our lives back. His eyes burned. Our lives, Teresa. I'm saying it out loud. There's no going back to the ice for me now. Not after the pond. Not after you walked into this room and made my whole chest hurt. A breath. Say yes. Yes, she said. And God help her, she wasn't only saying yes to the plan. The dress Aurora chose for her was black and severe, the uniform of the invisible. Elegant enough to belong on the private floor, plain enough to vanish against the marble. Hair up, Aurora said, pinning it herself with quick, cool fingers. Glasses, plain ones, no prescription. You keep your eyes down and your hands moving. A woman who's always doing something is a woman nobody looks at. She met Teresa's eyes in the mirror. You sure about this? No. Good. The ones who are sure get dead. Aurora stepped back. There. Even I almost don't recognize you. 10 years and grief have done you one favor. You don't look like the girl he remembers. You look like a woman who's been used up by this life. And that, cara, is the best disguise there is, because it's half true. The private floor of Eclisse was another world. A long, low room of black velvet and gold, a bar running down one wall, a wall of windows overlooking the club floor below, where bodies moved in the strobing dark to music that thumped up through the soles of her feet. Teresa took her place behind the bar and made herself small and busy, polishing glasses that were already clean, and waited. Salvatore arrived at 11. He came with 4 men, all of whom Teresa recognized, old family soldiers, the inner circle. They took the corner booth, the one angled so its occupants could see the door and no one could see them. Salvatore ordered without looking at her, Amaro, the good bottle, and whatever these animals want. And she poured with steady hands and set the drinks down and faded back, and he never once looked at her face. Vincent was right, she thought, half sick with the strangeness of it. I'm a lamp. For an hour it was nothing. Cards, cigars, the crude jokes of men who owned the night. She caught fragments, a shipment delayed at the port, a judge who needed reminding, a captain in Brooklyn getting greedy. Useful, some of it, but not what she'd come for. Then, at midnight, one of the men glanced at his watch and said, "He's early tonight." And something in the room changed. The cards were put away. 2 of the soldiers rose and went to stand by the door. Salvatore straightened his cuffs and composed his face into the careful blankness of a man about to meet someone he neither trusted nor could refuse. The door opened. The man who entered was old, 70, maybe more, small and dry, and immaculate in a suit that had cost more than Teresa's father's house. He walked with a silver-headed cane he clearly didn't need, and 2 young men flanked him, who moved like they'd kill on a nod. Teresa didn't know his face, but she knew the way Salvatore stood to greet him,
The slight bow, the deference, the careful respect of a servant to a master, and she understood that she was looking at the man who'd been paying for patience. "Don Ferro," Salvatore said, "you honour us." Ferro. The name went into Teresa like a hook. She kept polishing. She kept her eyes down, but every nerve in her body had turned toward that corner booth. "Sit, sit," the old man said, waving the honorifics away, lowering himself into the velvet. "We don't have long, and I don't like this city at night. It's full of Vincent's ghosts." A dry laugh. "Speaking of which, talk to me about the woman." Teresa's hand did not stop moving. It was the hardest thing she had ever done. "She came back for the father," Salvatore said. "Nothing more. Alberto's dying. She'll bury him and run back to her rock in the sea. She's no threat." "She left with a child in her belly." Ferro's voice was mild, and it froze the blood. 10 years ago, on your arrangement. And now she comes back with a boy who has Castellano's face. You think I don't have eyes in that house, Salvatore? You think I pay you all this money to be surprised? A pause. There is a son. Vincent has an heir. Everything we've built these 10 years, the patient wait for the line to die with him, you understand it is now worthless? The silence stretched. Teresa poured a drink no one had ordered, just to have something to do with her hands. "The boy can be handled," Salvatore said, low. "The boy is guarded by every gun Vincent owns, and Vincent has made you responsible for him." Ferro's cane tapped once on the marble, which means if the child so much as falls off a bicycle, Vincent looks at you. He's not a fool, our Ice King. He's boxed you in beautifully. I almost admire it. The old man leaned forward, which tells me he suspects, or she does, which tells me our 10-year investment is now a 10-year liability, walking around this city knowing your face. His voice sharpened to a blade. "I did not wait a decade to be undone by a woman and a child, Salvatore. Fix it. Fix all of it, or I will find someone who can, and the first thing they fix will be you." He rose. The audience was over. And as he turned to go, his cane caught the edge of the bar, and he glanced up. Just a flick, just for a second, directly at the woman behind it. Teresa kept her eyes down. She kept her hands moving. She was a lamp. She was furniture. She was nobody. The old man's gaze held on her a half-second too long. Then he moved on, and he was gone, and the door closed, and Salvatore let out a long breath and reached for the Amaro with a hand that, she saw it, she was close enough to see it, trembled very slightly. Teresa finished polishing the glass. She set it down, and inside her chest her heart was a fist pounding on a door, screaming one word over and over, "Ferro, Ferro, Ferro." She had a name now. She had the man behind the man. She also, she realized, as she caught her own reflection in the black window, had been seen. "Did he recognize you?" Vincent's voice was flat and lethal over the phone. "Teresa, answer me. Did Ferro recognize you?" "I don't know." She was in the back stairwell of a Cliss, breathing hard, still in the black dress. "He looked, at the end, but I kept my face down. Vincent, I was so careful." "Where are you now?" "Service stairs. Aurora said to wait. She's clearing me away out the back." "No." His voice cracked like a whip.
You don't move on Aurora's timing, you move on mine. I have 2 men in the kitchen, Enzo's nephew and a boy named Rocco. I'm calling them now. They will come to you, they will say the word pond, and you will go with them, and no one else. Do you understand? If someone comes to that stairwell and does not say pond, you run. Vincent, you're scaring me.
Good. A breath, and when he spoke again, the ice had cracked, and underneath it was something raw. I'm scaring you because I'm terrified, Teresa. I put you in that room. If anything happens to you... He stopped. Just wait for the word. I'm already in the car. The line went dead. She waited in the concrete dark, her heart slamming, and the 2 minutes felt like 2 years. Somewhere above her, the club throbbed. Somewhere out in the city, an old man with a silver cane was deciding whether she lived. She thought about Matteo, asleep in the fortress penthouse. She thought about the pond and skipped stones and the sound of Vincent laughing. Footsteps on the stairs. She pressed herself into the shadow of a support pillar. 2 men descending, fast and quiet. She could not see their faces. "Pond," said the first one softly. "Signorina, pond. Vincent sent us." She nearly sobbed with relief. "Here, I'm here." They moved like professionals, one ahead and one behind, out through the kitchens where the staff studiously saw nothing, out into an alley where a car sat idling with its lights off. They put her in the back seat and pulled away smooth and fast, and it was only when the doors locked and the car turned onto the expressway that she let herself shake. Vincent was waiting in the penthouse garage when they arrived, and the moment the car door opened he was there. Not the Ice King, not the strategist, but a man who crossed the concrete in 4 strides and pulled her out of the seat and into his arms with a force that knocked the breath out of her. "You're all right." His voice was against her hair, rough and unsteady. "You're all right. Tell me you're all right." "I'm all right." She was gripping the front of his shirt with both fists, and she couldn't seem to let go. "Vincent, I'm all right." He held her at arm's length to look at her, really look, his hands moving over her shoulders, her face, checking for damage the way a man checks something he cannot bear to lose. And then he pulled her back in and just held her, there in the garage under the fluorescent light, and neither of them spoke for a long moment. "I sent you in there," he said finally. "I put you in front of them. If Pharaoh had..." He couldn't finish it. "You didn't send me. I chose. We chose." She drew back enough to see his face. "And it worked, Vincent. I have the name. Pharaoh. Don Pharaoh. An old man, 70 at least, silver cane, 2 young guns. Salvatore bowed to him. "He's the one. He's been paying Salvatore for 10 years to wait you out, to let your line die with you." The words tumbled out. "He knows about Matteo. He said he has eyes in the house. He told Salvatore to fix it, to fix all of it, me and the boy both, or he'd find someone who'd fix Salvatore first." Vincent had gone very still. "Pharaoh. You know the name?" "Giacomo Pharaoh." His voice was distant, cold, the strategist surfacing through the fear. "He sat on the commission with my father. He was supposed to have retired to Florida 15 years ago. Everyone thinks he's a harmless old man growing oranges." A muscle worked in his jaw. "He's the one who floated the marriage proposal 10 years ago. The one I refused inside a week." He looked at her, and the pieces were locking together behind his eyes. It was never about the marriage, Teresa. The marriage was the opening move. When I refused it, when I chose you, Pharaoh didn't fight me. He just changed strategy. He went to Salvatore instead. He decided if he couldn't control my house through a wife, he'd hollow it out from the inside and take it when I died childless and alone. "And you almost did," she whispered. "Die childless and alone." Almost. His hands tightened on her arms. "But you took the child, and you lived, both of you. And you came back, and now the whole thing's undone. That's why Pharaoh's rattled. That's why he's telling Salvatore to move fast and sloppy." His eyes sharpened. "A frightened man makes mistakes. We've spooked the old spider. Now we let him tangle himself." Upstairs, Matteo was asleep, and Vincent stood a long moment in the doorway of the boy's room, watching the small shape rise and fall in the dark. And Teresa watched Vincent watch him, and she thought her heart might break with the enormity of what had almost been lost, and what was almost, maybe, being found. "I want to tell him," Vincent said quietly, not turning, "that I'm his father. I don't want him to learn it in the middle of a war. I want him to have it before, in case—" He stopped. "In case something happens to one of us. I've made a lot of enemies, Teresa. Pharaoh's just the oldest." He finally turned. "If I die in this, I want my son to have known, even for a day, that his father loved him. Not the story you told him, the truth." Teresa's eyes filled. "Then we tell him. Together. Tomorrow." She reached out and took his hand in the dark hallway. "But you're not going to die in this, Vincent Castellana. I didn't spend 10 years keeping that boy alive to lose you the week he gets a father." He looked down at their joined hands. And then he lifted hers to his mouth and pressed a kiss to her knuckles. Slow, deliberate, a promise. And over their hands his eyes found hers and held them. And the air between them went thick and hot and impossible. "When this is over," he said against her skin. "When this is over," she agreed. But neither of them moved to let go. They told him in the morning, at the kitchen table, over pancakes that no one ate. Teresa had rehearsed 100 versions and used none of them. In the end, it was Vincent who spoke, and he did it plainly, the way she'd learned he did the hard things. "Matteo, I need to tell you something true, and it's a big thing, so take your time with it." He'd set down his coffee and folded his hands, and the great cold dawn of Manhattan looked, for the first time since she'd come home, uncertain. "The story your mother told you, that your father died before you were born, that story isn't true. She told it to keep you safe. There were bad men who would have hurt you if they'd known who your father was." A breath. "I'm your father, Matteo. I've been looking for you for a long time without knowing you existed. And now I've found you." The boy went very still. He looked at Vincent, at the mouth that was his mouth, the eyes that were his eyes, and then at his mother. And Teresa nodded, her throat too tight for words. "You taught me to skip stones," Matteo said slowly.
I did. Grandpapa taught you, you said. The boy's brow furrowed, working it through with that grave intelligence that undid them both. So, Grandpapa is he's your papa too? No, Grandpapa Alberto is your mother's father, but he taught me when I was your age because he was like a father to me. My own father died when I was young. Vincent's voice stayed steady. So, you and I, we have that in common. We both grew up without knowing something we should have known. Matteo was quiet a long time. He picked up his fork and put it down, and then he asked the question that split the room open. Did you want me? Before, when you didn't know? His small chin was set hard against a tremble. Or is it only now, because I'm here and you have to? Vincent's composure cracked clean down the middle. Teresa saw it go, saw the ice shatter, saw the man underneath, saw 10 years of grief and rage and starved-out love rise up in his eyes all at once. He got up from his chair and came around the table and crouched down in front of the boy, level with him, the way he always did. "Listen to me," he said, and his voice was thick. "For 9 years I didn't know you existed, and that whole time, every single day, there was a hole in me, the exact shape of you. I didn't know what it was. I thought I was just a cold, angry man. I thought that was who I'd become." He took the boy's small hands in his big, scarred ones. "And then you walked into a kitchen in your pyjamas and looked at me. And I knew, instantly, I knew that hole had always been you. I have wanted you, Matteo, every day of your life. I just didn't have your name yet." His voice broke. "I have it now, and I am never, ever letting go of it. Do you understand me? Never." And Matteo, this careful, guarded child who took weeks to trust anyone, launched himself off the chair and into his father's arms. And Vincent caught him and held him so tightly and buried his face in the boy's hair, and Teresa put both hands over her mouth and wept. She wept for the 10 years, for the pond she'd never let him have sooner, for the man she'd run from on a lie, for the impossible, undeserved grace of this moment in a kitchen with cold pancakes, this thing being mended that she'd believed broken forever. When Matteo finally pulled back, he studied his father's wet face with frank interest. "You're crying." "Men cry," Vincent said, wiping his eyes without shame. "Anyone who tells you different is a coward. Remember that." "Okay," the boy considered. "Can I call you Papa, or is it too soon? Signora Bruno says some things are too soon." Vincent laughed, a wrecked, joyful sound. "It is not too soon. It will never be too soon." He pressed his forehead to his son's. "Papa, yes. God, yes." Later, when Matteo had gone off with Rocco to explore the penthouse's game room, a room Vincent had apparently built in a single frantic week, the two adults stood together at the great window over the river, and Vincent's hand found hers without either of them looking down. "Thank you," he said quietly. "For what? I'm the one who—" "For keeping him alive. For raising him into someone who asks a question like that." His fingers laced through hers. for coming back, even knowing what it would cost you. You could have buried your father and vanished again. I'd never have known." He turned to look at her. "Why didn't you?" She thought about it, about the truth. "Because I was tired of running," she said, "and because some part of me, a part I hated for 10 years, never stopped hoping there was an explanation. That the man I fell in love with wasn't the man who let me go without fighting." She met his eyes. "Turns out, he never let me go at all. He just didn't know I was gone until it was too late." Vincent lifted her hand and kissed it again, and this time, when his eyes came up, they were burning. "When this is over," he said, low. "You keep saying that." "Because when this is over," he said, "I am going to spend a very long time showing you exactly how much I never let you go." His thumb traced a slow circle on her wrist, over the pulse that was suddenly hammering. "And I am a patient man, Teresa, but I am running very short of patience where you're concerned." Don Ferro made his move 3 days later, and it came, as the cruelest moves do, dressed as a kindness. An invitation arrived at the penthouse, heavy cream paper, a familiar crest, inviting Don Vincent Castellano and his family to a dinner at the Ferro estate on Long Island. A celebration, the card read, of the return of the Marchetti family to our city, and of joyful news I understand is worth celebrating. Bring the boy. Old men love the sound of children in a house. Vincent read it twice and set it down on the marble very gently, which Teresa was learning was more frightening than if he'd thrown it. "He wants us in his house," she said. "All 3 of us, Matteo included." "He wants to look at my son." Vincent's voice was arctic. "He wants to measure the threat with his own eyes, and he wants to remind me, in the most civilized way possible, that he can invite my child into his home, and I can't refuse without declaring war I'm not ready to declare." He turned the card over. "It's beautifully done. It always is with Ferro." "We're not taking Matteo into that house." "No, we're not." He said it flatly. "But we can't refuse the invitation either. Refusing tells him we're afraid, tells him we know, and then he stops being patient." He paced to the window. "So we go, you and I. We bring regrets about the boy, a fever, a chill. Children are so delicate. And we sit at Giacomo Ferro's table, and we smile, and we let him look at us and find nothing." He glanced back. "And while we do that, we get inside his house. Because a man like Ferro keeps records, Teresa. 10 years of paying Salvatore. That money came from somewhere, went somewhere, was written down somewhere. If I can get one of my people into his study during that dinner, Salvatore will be there. Salvatore will absolutely be there." Vincent's smile was thin and terrible. "Which is exactly what I'm counting on. Because I'm going to spend the whole evening making Salvatore Ruggiero believe I still trust him with my life. And a man who thinks he's winning gets careless." They planned it for 2 days. Vincent brought in a woman named Lucia, small, forgettable, a former cat burglar who now did quiet work for the family. The kind of person Ferro's men would never see. She would arrive with the catering staff. She would find the study. She would photograph everything and leave with the dessert trays. It was thin, and it was dangerous, and it was the only door they had. The night of the dinner, Teresa dressed in deep red, Vincent's choice, delivered to the penthouse in a box with no note. And when she came out in it, his breath caught audibly, and he went silent for a full 3 seconds before he could speak. "He'll look at you all night," Vincent said finally, his voice rough. "Every man in that room will. I chose it on purpose." "To distract them?" "To torment them." His eyes moved over her, dark and possessive and unhidden. "Pharaoh thinks he understands what he took from me 10 years ago. I want him to see it walk into his dining room in red and understand he never had the faintest idea." He crossed to her, tilted her chin up. "Stay close to me tonight. Whatever happens, whatever he says to bait me, and he will bait me, Teresa. He'll say things about you, about the boy, designed to make me lose the ice. You keep me steady. Can you do that?" "I've been keeping myself steady in worse rooms than his for 10 years, she said. "I'll keep you." The Pharaoh estate was a monument to old money and older sins, a Gilded Age mansion behind iron gates, lit like a stage, cars disgorging the aristocracy of the underworld in furs and dark suits. Salvatore greeted them at the door, all warmth, kissing Teresa's cheeks, clasping Vincent's hand. "Fratello, and the beautiful Teresa. Where's the little one? Giacomo will be crushed." "Fever," Teresa said smoothly. "You know how they are. I couldn't bear to leave him at first, but Vincent insisted the doctor was enough." Of course, of course." Salvatore's eyes lingered on her face a half-beat too long, and she felt it, the faint animal wariness of a man who half recognizes something and can't place it. She kept her smile soft and empty. "I'm a lamp," she reminded herself. "I'm furniture in red." Don Ferro received them in a drawing-room the size of a chapel. Up close he was smaller than she remembered from the club, and infinitely more dangerous, the way a folded blade is more dangerous than an open one. He took Teresa's hand in both his dry, cool ones, and looked up at her with rheumy, laughing eyes that missed absolutely nothing. "So this is the woman," he said, "the one who broke the Ice King's heart and mended it in the same year. Extraordinary." He patted her hand. "You know, my dear, you have a marvellous face. So calm, so still. I feel I've seen it somewhere recently, and I can't for the life of me place where." His smile widened, and it was a trap with teeth. "Do you ever visit clubs, my dear? I'm an old man, I forget faces, but yours—" "I don't go out much," Teresa said, meeting his gaze without a flicker. "I'm afraid I've spent 10 years somewhere very quiet. There's nothing to remember." Ferrot held her eyes a moment, then he laughed, delighted, and let her hand go. "No," he said softly. "I don't suppose there is." But he had seen. She knew it in her bones. He had seen, and he was letting her know he'd seen. And the game had just changed, from hunting to being hunted. All in the space of a handshake. Across the room, she caught Vincent's eye. He'd seen it too. The dinner had not even begun, and they were already losing. They sat 12, at a table meant for 30, under a chandelier that could have crushed them all, and Don Ferro conducted the evening like an orchestra. He was charming. That was the horror of it. He told stories about Vincent's father, funny stories, warm ones, and Teresa watched Vincent have to smile at tales of a man this same devil had likely helped into the ground. He asked after the family, the business, the health of the old Don Alberto, Such a shame, such a good man. We came up together, you know. He praised the wine, and the woman in red, and the fine spring weather. And under all of it, like a blade drawn slowly across a whetstone, he probed. "The boy," he said, over the fish course, apparently apropos of nothing. "Matteo, yes? 9 years old. Remarkable how fast a child can appear in a man's life. One day nothing, the next a whole heir." He smiled at Vincent. "You must be so relieved, Vincenzo. A man in your position without a son. Well, it makes people restless. It makes them plan." A sip of wine. "I imagine there are men who spent years planning around the assumption you'd die with no one to leave it to. Imagine their surprise." His eyes glittered. Imagine their disappointment. It was aimed at Salvatore. Teresa saw it land, saw the consigliere's fork pause, saw him force it to move again. He's turning them on each other, she realized. The old spider knows Salvatore's failed him, and he's letting Salvatore know, in front of everyone, that his patience has run out. "Well," Vincent said easily, "men who plan around another man's death usually get disappointed. It's an unreliable business, waiting for someone to die." He raised his glass. "I've found it's better to simply be too useful and too well loved to remove. Wouldn't you agree, Sal? You've been at my side, 15 years now? You'd know better than anyone how hard I am to get rid of." 15 years, Salvatore said, and his smile was a rictus. "And every one of them I've watched your enemies underestimate you. It never ends well for them." "No," Vincent agreed, holding his gaze. "It never does." The two men looked at each other across the table, and Teresa understood she was watching something ancient and lethal pass between them, a message, an accusation, a threat, all wrapped in the silk of dinner conversation. Vincent was telling Salvatore, "I know." Salvatore was hearing it, and Ferro, at the head of the table, was watching them both with the deep pleasure of a man who has set 2 dogs on each other and only has to wait. Somewhere in the house, Teresa knew, Lucia was moving through the servants' corridors toward the study. Every minute they held this table was a minute she had to work. So Teresa did the only thing she could do. She made herself interesting. "Don Ferro," she said, setting down her glass, "Vincent tells me you knew his father better than anyone living. I never met him. I was too young, and then I was gone. Would you tell me about him? Not the business, the man." She leaned in, all warm attention, the woman in red giving the old devil exactly what old devils love most, an audience. "What was he like when he was young, before all this?" Pharaoh's whole face changed, lit up with the terrible vanity of the aged, the hunger to be the one who remembers, and he began to talk. And he talked, and Teresa listened as though he were the only man in the world, and the minutes stretched, and somewhere Lucia photographed a decade of transactions, and Vincent shot Teresa a single glance down the table that said, more clearly than words, "You magnificent, terrifying woman." The story went on for 20 minutes. It bought Lucia every second she needed. But Ferro was not a fool, and when he finished, he dabbed his mouth with his napkin and looked at Teresa with new, cold appraisal, all the warmth gone as fast as it had come. "You're very good," he said quietly, so only she and Vincent could hear, keeping an old man talking, filling the silence. One might almost think you wanted the room's attention here, at this table, and nowhere else. He set down the napkin. "Tell me, my dear, where are my dessert staff? They're very late." He raised a hand, and a man near the door slipped out. "I do like to keep track of everyone in my house. Old habit, you understand." Teresa's blood turned to ice. Beside her, she felt Vincent go absolutely still. The seconds crawled. The man returned and bent to murmur in Ferrot's ear. The old man listened, and his face did something complicated. Surprise, then anger, then, worst of all, amusement. "Well," he said, sitting back, "it seems one of my catering girls has wandered off somewhere she oughtn't. Gone now, out the kitchen door, quick as you like." He looked between Vincent and Teresa, and he was smiling, and it was the smile of a man who has just realized the full scope of the game and finds it delicious. How enterprising of somebody. "Vincenzo, did you bring a thief into my home?" "I brought a woman in red and an empty stomach," Vincent said without a flicker. "If your staff can't be trusted, Giacomo, that's your house to manage, not mine." The two dons looked at each other down the length of the table. The whole room had gone silent. Every soldier along the walls had grown very attentive, and Teresa, heart pounding, understood that whatever Lucia had gotten out of that study, it had cost them the last of their secrecy. Ferrot knew now, knew they were moving against him, knew the war had already started. The only question left was whether Lucia had made it out with the proof, or whether they'd just declared war and lost the same night. Lucia had made it out. She was waiting in a safe apartment in Queens when Vincent and Teresa arrived near 2 in the morning, still in their dinner clothes. Teresa's red dress incongruous against the shabby furniture. Lucia sat at a kitchen table with a laptop and a cigarette and a face like a woman who'd seen a ghost. "I got it," she said. "All of it. 10 years of ledgers, photographed page by page. But Don Vincent," she dragged on the cigarette, "you need to see what's in it, because it's not what you think." Vincent pulled out a chair. "Show me." Lucia turned the laptop. Page after page of a small, crabbed hand. Dates, amounts, initials, payments out, payments in. And Vincent leaned in, and Teresa watched his face as he read, and she watched it go from cold focus to something she'd never seen there before, bewilderment, and then a dawning horror. "These payments," Vincent said slowly, "to Salvatore. They start 10 years ago, like we thought, regular, monthly." His finger traced down the column. "But look at the amounts. They're small, salaries almost, retainers." He looked up. "This isn't the money you pay a man to steal an empire, Teresa. This is the money you pay a man to report. Salvatore wasn't Ferro's partner. He was Ferro's informant." A pause. "And a badly paid one." "Keep reading," Lucia said grimly. "It gets worse." Vincent scrolled and stopped. And Teresa, watching over his shoulder, saw the entry that had stopped him and felt the floor tilt. Because there, in the ledger, 10 years back, dated the very week she'd fled, a single large payment, $50,000. And beside it, in Ferro's crabbed hand, an annotation. "Per la ragazza, come concordato con V." For the girl, as agreed with V. V. Teresa whispered. Vincent, that's you. It says, as agreed with V. It says you paid to send me away. I didn't. Vincent's voice was hoarse. Teresa, I swear on our son's life, I didn't know you were pregnant. I didn't know you were leaving. I would never. I know. She gripped his shoulder. I know you didn't. But someone wanted this written down. Someone wanted a record that said the Don himself ordered it, so that if it ever came out, it would point at you and not at them. She stared at the entry. It's insurance. It's a frame. 10 years old and waiting. V, Vincent said again, and something was happening in his face, some terrible reordering. V isn't me. He looked up at Lucia. Was there more? Anything with that same V? Earlier entries, other years? Lucia scrolled back further, into ledgers that predated the 10 years, into books from 20 years ago, 25. And the V appeared again and again, always in the same context, agreements, arrangements, understandings. Come concordato con V. Your father, Teresa breathed. Vincent, your father's name. Vittorio, Vincent said. The word came out of him like something torn loose. My father was Vittorio Castellano. He stared at the screen. These arrangements with V, they go back before I was born. Ferro and my father were partners, not rivals, not enemies, partners in something that ran for 30 years. He scrolled, faster now, his hand not quite steady. And when my father died, and I took the seat, and I refused to keep playing along, when I refused Ferro's marriage, when I refused his deals, when I tried to run the family clean of him, he decided to take back what he thought was half his, Teresa finished. Through Salvatore, through you having no heir. But Vincent had gone silent, staring at one final entry. And his silence was so absolute that Teresa's skin prickled. What? She said. What is it? He didn't answer. He turned the laptop toward her with a hand that had gone bloodless. The entry was dated 3 weeks after his father's death, 12 years ago. The amount was enormous, larger than any other in the book. And the annotation, in Ferro's hand, read, Vittorio, sistemato, come concordato. Il ragazzo non saprà mai. Vittorio, handled, as agreed. The boy will never know. My father didn't die of a heart attack, Vincent said. His voice was a stranger's. Ferro killed him. Ferro had him killed, handled, as agreed, which means somebody inside my own house agreed to it. And then that somebody stood next to me at the funeral and swore loyalty and has spent 12 years at my right hand. He looked up, and his eyes were terrible, empty, blown wide with a rage so total it had gone quiet. It was never about my empire, Teresa. Salvatore didn't want my chair. He helped murder my father to get me the chair. A young Don, grieving, dependent on his loyal consigliere. And then he spent 12 years running me like a puppet for Ferro, and the moment I started cutting the strings, they moved to erase my line before I could build one of my own. The apartment was very quiet. Lucia stubbed out her cigarette. So, she said, now you know. Now I know. Vincent closed the laptop slowly. And when he stood, he was calm, the calmest Teresa had ever seen him. And it was the most frightening thing she had ever witnessed, because it was the calm of a man who has stopped feeling anything
except one single thing. Salvatore Ruggiero helped kill my father. He stole 9 years of my son. He turned the woman I love into a ghost. He picked up his coat. I'm going to take everything from him. His name, his money, his men, his life. And then I'm going to do the same to Giacomo Ferro. He looked at Teresa. But first, I need you and Matteo somewhere they can never reach. Because the moment I move, this city catches fire. The fortress within the fortress was a safe house upstate, a stone farmhouse ringed by fields, invisible from the road, wired like a bank vault. Vincent moved Teresa and Matteo there before dawn, with Enzo and 6 men, and he did not stay. "You're leaving?" Teresa said. She followed him out to the cars in the grey light, her arms wrapped around herself against the cold. "You're going back into the city alone, to move against 2 men who've been planning your death for a decade, and you're leaving us here." "I'm leaving you here because it's the only place I know you're safe." He was checking a pistol, sliding it into the holster under his arm, and the domestic horror of watching him arm himself in a farmhouse driveway made her chest ache. "If you're with me, you're a lever they can pull. If Matteo's with me, he's a target painted on my back. Here, behind Enzo and these walls, you're just 2 people who don't exist." He looked up. "I need you not to exist for a little while longer, Teresa. I'm sorry, I know what I'm asking." "You're asking me to sit in a field and wait to find out if you're alive," she said, and her voice cracked. "You're asking me to do the thing I've done for 10 years, to hide, to wait, to be helpless while the men fight the war. I hate it, Vincent. I'm good at it, and I hate it with everything in me." He stopped. Something in his face shifted, the strategist giving way, just for a moment, to the man. "I know," he said quietly. "That's what he took from you, isn't it? That's what I saw in you the first time all those years ago. You were never built to hide. And I'm about to put you back in a box." He crossed to her, took her face in both hands. "So here's my promise. This is the last time. After this, however it ends, you never hide again. Not from anyone. If I win, you stand beside me in the light, where the whole city can see you, and God help anyone who looks at you wrong. And if I lose—" His thumbs moved over her cheekbones. "If I lose, you take our son and you live out loud wherever you want. And you tell him his father wasn't a coward, that he went down fighting to get you both back. Promise me." "Don't talk like that." "Promise me." "I promise." The tears came then, hot and furious. "And you promise me you'll come back. You don't get to make a speech about the light and then die in the dark, Vincent Castellano. You promise me you come back to us." "Teresa, there's something I never got to say." The words tore out of her before she could stop them. 10 years ago, before the man came to my terrace, before any of it, I loved you. Not the way a girl loves, the real way. The way that doesn't have an off switch. And then I ran. And I told myself I stopped, and I was lying every single day for 10 years. She gripped his wrists. "I never stopped. I love you now. I love you so much it terrifies me. And if you die before I get to love you properly, in the light, with our son in the next room, I will never forgive you. Do you understand me? Never." For a moment, Vincent didn't move, and then he kissed her. It was not the careful, held-back thing he'd stopped himself from doing before. It was 10 years of it, all at once, his mouth hard and desperate on hers, his hands fisting in her hair, her whole body arching up into him. She kissed him back like she was drowning and he was air, like she could keep him alive by refusing to let go, and he made a sound against her mouth that was half a groan and half her name, and the grey dawn and the armed men and the war all fell away, and there was only this, only him, only the thing that had never once stopped burning in 10 years of ice and ocean. When they finally broke apart, they were both shaking. "That," Vincent said roughly, his forehead against hers, "is what I'm coming back for. Remember it, because when this is over, I am going to spend the rest of my life finishing what I just started, and I am going to need decades, Teresa, so you make very sure I don't die." "Come back," she whispered. "Just come back." "I will." He kissed her once more, softer, a seal on the vow. "I swear it under this ugly sky. I will come back to you." He got in the car, and Teresa stood in the field with her arms wrapped around herself and watched the tail lights disappear down the long road toward the city and the fire. And she did not cry, because she had done enough crying for 10 years, and she was done with it now. Instead, she went inside, and she found Matteo at the window, watching too, and she put her arm around him. "Where's Papa going?" the boy asked. "To fix something that's been broken a long time," she said, "so we can stop hiding, so we can live in the light." Matteo leaned into her. "Will he win?" Teresa looked out at the empty road, and she made herself say it, because he needed to hear it, and because she needed to believe it, and because after 10 years of lies, she was only going to tell her son the truth from now on. "Yes," she said, "he'll win. Because he's not fighting for power anymore, amore. He's fighting for us. And a man fighting for the people he loves is the most dangerous thing in the world." She hoped to God it was true. Vincent Castellano went to war the way winter comes, slowly and then all at once. He did not storm anything. That was not his way, and it was not what the situation demanded. Instead, over 4 days, he pulled threads. He went first to the captains, the men who ran the boroughs, the earners, the ones whose loyalty was ultimately to strength and success rather than to any single man. He met them one by one, quietly, and he showed them a single photograph from Lucia's cache, the entry recording the murder of Vittorio Castellano, 12 years dead, beloved of every man in that generation. Come concordato, as agreed. He let them read it. He let them understand that the man who'd built this thing, whose funeral half of them had wept at, had been sold to Giacomo Ferro, like a shipment at the port. And he watched the loyalty that Salvatore had spent 12 years cultivating turn in the space of a photograph to ash. "Who agreed?" the captains asked, one after another. "It says as agreed. Agreed with who?" "That's the question, isn't it?" Vincent would say. "Someone inside our house agreed to sell our Don. Someone who's still here, still eating at our table, still calling himself family." And he let them draw the circle themselves, let them count the men who'd had that access 12 years ago, let them arrive on their own at the single name that fit. By the 3rd day, Salvatore Ruggiero could feel it.
Teresa heard it from Enzo, who heard it from the city, the consigliere's calls going unreturned, meetings suddenly rescheduled, a coldness in rooms that had always been warm to him. A man who has spent his life reading rooms feels the temperature drop before he understands why. On the fourth day, Salvatore came to the penthouse looking for Vincent and found him waiting. Teresa was not there. She was upstate, climbing the walls, getting the story hours later in fragments. But she pieced it together, and in her mind she saw it like a film. The two men, the brothers in all but blood, in the great glass room over the river. "You've been busy," Salvatore said. "The captains won't take my calls. Rocco looks at me like I'm a stranger."
"What have you been telling them, fratello?"
"The truth," Vincent said. "I've developed a taste for it lately." A silence. And then Salvatore, who was many things but not stupid, understood that the game was fully over, and he stopped pretending. "How long have you known?" he said. "Long enough." Vincent's voice was ice. "I know about the girl. I know about the 50,000. I know you sat on my terrace in a scarf and a mask and told the woman I loved that I'd betrayed her and sent her across an ocean pregnant with my son." A pause. "And I know about my father, Salvatore. I know what 'handled as agreed' means. I know who agreed." To his credit, or his damnation, Salvatore didn't deny it. He walked to the window and looked out at the city he'd tried to steal, and when he spoke, his voice was tired. "He was going to pass me over," Salvatore said. "Your father. 30 years I served him, and he was going to give it all to a boy of 26 who didn't know the business, didn't know the men, didn't know anything except that he was born with the right name." He laughed bitterly. "Pharaoh came to me. He said, 'Why should blood matter more than loyalty, more than service?' He said, 'We could do it together. Put you on the chair, young and grateful and easy to guide, and run the whole thing between us.' And he turned. I told myself it was practical, that Vittorio was old and hard, and I was doing what he'd have done in my place. I told myself 1,000 things." "You told yourself lies, so you could murder the man who raised us both," Vincent said. "And then you spent 12 years lying to me. And when I started slipping the leash, you tried to erase my son before he could exist." He stepped closer. "There's no version of this where you walk out, Sal. You know that. You've known it since the captains stopped answering." "Pharaoh will bury you," Salvatore said. "You've made noise, you've turned the captains, but Pharaoh's been at this since before you were born. He has the commission. He has judges, cops, the port, half the money in this city. You've won a battle in a war you don't understand." He straightened. "But you're right about one thing. I'm already dead. The moment Pharaoh hears the captains have turned on me, I'm a loose end, and he cuts loose ends." A grim smile. "So maybe I do one honest thing before the end." Vincent went very still. "Meaning I'll give you Pharaoh." Salvatore spread his hands. "Everything. The commission votes he's bought, the murders he's ordered, where the bodies and the books are. 12 years of him running me. I know it all. I'll testify, I'll wear a wire, I'll do whatever gets that old spider in the ground before he gets me." His eyes hardened. "On one condition. You're not in a position for conditions." "The boy," Salvatore's voice dropped. "Your son. When this is over, you keep him far from all of it. You let him grow up something other than what we are. That's my condition." A terrible pause. Because whatever else I've done, and I've done everything, I never actually hurt a child. I want that to still be true when I die." Vincent looked at the man who had destroyed his life, and Teresa, hearing it later, would never forget the thing he said.
"That was never going to be your gift to give," Vincent said quietly. "My son grows up free because his mother kept him alive, not because you asked nicely at the end." He nodded once. "But you'll give me Pharaoh, and then we'll see what mercy's left in me. It isn't much." They wired Salvatore on a Sunday. It should have been impossible. A consigliere turning on the don who owned him, walking into the old spider's web with a recorder taped to his chest. But Salvatore Ruggiero had spent his whole life being trusted by dangerous men, and he had one last performance in him. Teresa was brought back to the city for it, over Vincent's objections, because she refused to be upstate for the end of a thing she'd bled 10 years for. They set up in a van 3 blocks from the Ferro estate. Vincent, Teresa, Lucia, and 2 federal agents from a task force Vincent had spent 4 days and a great many favours bringing to the table. Because the second half of his plan had been the thing that finally shocked Teresa. Vincent Castellano was going to hand Giacomo Ferro not to a bullet, but to the government. "You're working with the FBI," she'd said when he told her. "You, the Ice King of Manhattan." "Ferro has judges and cops in his pocket," Vincent had said. "If I put a bullet in him, his people scatter and reform and come for my son in 5 years, 10 years when I'm not watching. But if I put him in a federal courtroom with Salvatore's testimony and 12 years of ledgers, I don't just kill the man, I burn down the whole structure. The commission seats, the board judges, all of it, legally, permanently." His jaw had tightened. "I spent 10 years learning to be the coldest man in this city. Turns out, the coldest thing I can do is make it legal. Ferro would rather I shot him. That's how I know it's right." So they sat in a van and listened. Salvatore's voice came through clear and steady, the greeting at the door, the walk to the study. And then Ferro's dry, old voice, and Teresa gripped Vincent's hand in the dark of the van as the old spider began, unknowing, to hang himself. "You're nervous," Ferro observed. "You've been nervous for a week. The captains, yes? They've grown cold to you." "Vincent's turned them," Salvatore said. "He knows Giacomo. About the girl. About the money. I think he even knows about Vittorio." A long silence on the recording. Teresa held her breath. "Then you've become a problem," Ferro said at last, mild as milk. "You understand that. 12 years I've kept you useful, and now you're a man who knows too much and controls nothing. In the old days, I'd have handled this before you finished your sentence." "You'd kill me," Salvatore said, "after 12 years. "I'd have handled you," Ferro corrected, "the way we handled Vittorio. Cleanly, as agreed." A rustle, as of an old man settling deeper into a chair. "You were there, Salvatore. You held the door while my man did the work. Don't play the wounded innocent with me now. We murdered a don together and put his puppy on the throne, and it worked beautifully until the puppy grew teeth." A dry chuckle. 12 years of good business. Pity to end it. But the woman came back with the boy, and now the boy exists, and a Castellano heir undoes everything. So,
A pause that stopped Teresa's heart. The child has to go. You'll see to it. You've delayed long enough, and your delay is the only reason Vincent's still ahead of us. Handle the boy, Salvatore, the way you should have handled the mother 10 years ago. In the van, Vincent had gone absolutely rigid. Teresa realized she was crushing his hand and couldn't stop. Say it plainly, Salvatore's voice came, and only Teresa and Vincent understood what it cost him, this fishing for the words that would put the old man in a cell. You want me to kill Vincent's son, a 9-year-old boy? Say it plainly, and I'll do it. I want you to kill the child, Ferro said, with the flat impatience of a man ordering a car.
Matteo Castellano, tonight, if you can manage it. Am I plain enough for you, or has age made you deaf as well as slow? The federal agent in the van closed his eyes. That's it, he breathed. That's conspiracy to murder a minor, on tape from the principal. We've got him. My God, we've got him. But Vincent was already moving. Vincent! Teresa grabbed his arm. He just ordered our son's death. Vincent's voice was the quiet that came before something breaking. On tape or not, in a courtroom or not, that man just said the words, "Kill the child," about Matteo. I need to hear the rest. Sit down. I'm not going anywhere, but I need to hear it. They listened as Salvatore extracted more. Dates, names, the whole architecture of Ferro's corruption, the old man spilling it all in the comfort of his own study, to the one person he was sure he still owned. It was, Teresa realized, an extraordinary act of nerve and self-destruction. Salvatore Ruggiero was cutting his own throat with every question. And he knew it, and he did it anyway. And she did not know what to do with the fact that she almost respected him for it. And then, on the recording, a new voice, a young man's voice, one of Ferro's guns. Don Ferro, forgive me. There's a van, 3 blocks east. It's been there 90 minutes and it doesn't belong to anyone on the street. The silence on the tape was total. Salvatore, Ferro said, and his voice had changed entirely. Every trace of the doddering old man gone, replaced by something cold and vast and ancient. Stand up. Open your shirt. In the van, the federal agent was already shouting into his radio, and Vincent had a gun in his hand, and Teresa's whole world had narrowed to a single point of terror, because 3 blocks away the trap had just closed on the wrong people, and Salvatore Ruggiero was standing in a room full of Ferro's killers with a wire taped to his chest. Everything happened at once. Through the wire they heard it, the scrape of Salvatore's chair, Ferro's voice rising to a shout, "Take him!" The ugly sounds of men lunging, a crash, and then Salvatore's voice, no longer performing, roaring something that was half curse and half prayer. Then 2 gunshots, enormous in the confined space, distorting the recording to a scream of static. "Go!" the federal agent bellowed into his radio. "All units, go! Shots fired! Go, go, go!" The van was already moving. Teresa was thrown against the wall as it lurched forward, and Vincent had her by the shoulder, holding her upright, his face a mask of terrible calm. "Listen to me," he said over the chaos. "When we stop, you stay in this van. You do not get out. Ferro's men are trained, and they're cornered, and cornered men kill everything that moves." His grip tightened. Matteo's safe upstate. Enzo has him. Whatever happens in the next 10 minutes, our son is safe, and that's the only thing that matters. Say it. "Matteo's safe," she repeated,
numb. Say it again. Matteo's safe. The van screamed around the last corner, and the Ferro estate blazed into view, and it was already a war. Federal vehicles poured through the iron gates.
Ferro's men had come out onto the great front steps and the lawn, and muzzle flashes stuttered in the dark, and the beautiful gilded age mansion echoed with the flat, vicious crack of gunfire. Teresa saw a body on the marble steps. She couldn't tell whose. Vincent was out of the van before it fully stopped. "Vincent!" she screamed. But he was gone, moving low and fast across the lawn with his gun up, and she understood with sick clarity that he had never intended to leave this to the agents, that whatever he'd said about courtrooms and legality, Giacomo Ferro had ordered the death of his son, and there was a very old law under all the new ones, and Vincent had come to collect on it personally. She did not stay in the van. She would think about that later, about the promise she broke in 3 seconds. But her son's father was running into gunfire, and she had spent 10 years being the one who stayed behind, who hid, who waited, and something in her simply refused to do it one more time. She grabbed the second agent's spare radio, and she went out the back of the van, and she ran, crouched, along the estate wall, following the sound of Vincent. She found him at the side of the house, where a service door hung open. There was a man down in the doorway, one of Ferro's, and Vincent was stepping over him into the house, and Teresa slipped in behind him before he knew she was there. "You were supposed to stay in the van," he said, without turning, his voice deadly. "I've never once done what I was supposed to," she whispered. "Where's Salvatore?" "The study. That's where the shots came from." Vincent moved down the corridor, and she moved with him, and neither of them argued any more because there was no time. The sounds of the firefight were behind them now, outside, the agents pinning Ferro's men on the lawn. In here, it was quiet and dark, and worse for the quiet. The study door stood open. Inside, the smell of gunpowder and copper, and on the floor, in a spreading dark stain across an antique carpet, lay Salvatore Ruggiero, shot twice through the chest, still, impossibly, alive. Vincent crossed to him and dropped to one knee. Teresa followed, pressing her hands to the wounds, useless, the blood welling hot between her fingers. "Where's Ferro?" Vincent said. "Sal, where is he?" Salvatore's eyes found Vincent's face. His mouth moved, wet and red. "Ran," he managed. "Back, stairs, panic room, behind the bookcase. Always said he'd die in his own bed." A horrible laugh that became a cough. "Vincenzo, the wire. Did it record? Did I?" "Every word," Vincent said. "You gave us everything. It's done, Sal. You did it." Something eased in the dying man's face, and then his eyes moved on Teresa, and something like recognition, then something like an apology, crossed the ruined face. "The girl in red," he breathed. "Behind the bar. I knew I'd seen you." A wet cough. 10 years ago. The terrace. The boy's alive because I was too slow, and I... His hand found her bloody wrist, gripped it weakly. "Tell him. Not who I was, just that at the end, one thing was true." His eyes glazed. "Never touched the child." And then Salvatore Ruggiero, who had murdered one father and nearly destroyed another, was gone. Teresa knelt in the blood, with her dead enemy's hand on her wrist, and found to her horror that she was crying,
Not for him exactly, but for the wreckage of everything, for the 12 years and the 10 years and the sheer waste of it all. Teresa, Vincent's hand on her shoulder. He's gone, and Ferro's still breathing. His voice was flint. The bookcase. He said the bookcase. She looked up, wiped her face with the back of a red hand, and stood. Then let's finish it, she said. The bookcase was exactly where a dying man had said it would be. Vincent found the catch, a false spine, an old volume of Dante that didn't quite belong, and the case swung inward on silent hinges to reveal a steel door, shut tight, a keypad glowing green beside it. Behind that door, they both knew, an old spider sat waiting out the storm, certain that steel and money and 70 years of survival would see him through this the way they'd seen him through everything. He'll have a phone in there, Vincent said, low. He's calling in favours right now. Judges, the men he owns on the commission. By morning he'll have a story where he's the victim of a rogue don and a federal overreach, and half this city will believe it, because half this city owes him. He studied the keypad. The tape damns him. But tapes can be suppressed. Evidence can be lost. Witnesses. He glanced at the study behind them. Our witness is dead on the carpet. If Ferro gets out of that room and into a courtroom with his own lawyers, he might still walk. So we don't let him get to a courtroom on his terms, Teresa said. Vincent looked at her, and she saw the war in him, the old law and the new one, the bullet and the courtroom, the man his father raised and the man he'd been trying to become. Behind them, boots in the corridor, the federal agents, weapons up, flooding into the study, and then their commander, the one from the van, taking in the scene, the dead consigliere, the open bookcase, the steel door, the don and the woman standing before it. Castellano. The agent's gun wasn't quite pointed at Vincent, but it wasn't quite not. Step away from the door. Whatever you're thinking, step away. We have him on tape ordering a child's murder. We have the ledgers. He is going to die in a federal prison, and that is worse for a man like Ferro than anything you can do with that gun in your hand. Let me have him. Let me do this the way that lasts. Vincent didn't move. His hand was steady on the pistol. Teresa could see him weighing it, could see how badly the animal in him wanted the door open and the old man's life in his hands. For his father, for his son, for the 10 years. Vincent, she said quietly. He didn't look at her. You told me something, she said, at the farmhouse. You said the coldest thing you could do was make it legal. That Ferro would rather you shot him. That's how you'd know it was right. She stepped closer, put her bloodied hand on his forearm over the gun. He's in there, praying you open that door. He's praying for the bullet, Vincent, because the bullet makes you the animal he always said you were, and it makes Matteo the son of a man who executed an old man behind a bookcase. Don't give it to him. Her voice broke. Give our son a father who won the right way. Give him the story where you didn't have to become them to beat them. For a long, long moment, Vincent Castellano stood before the steel door with a gun in his hand and a decade of rage in his chest. And then he lowered the gun. Open it, he said to the agent. It's your door. I was never here. He handed the pistol over, grip first,
and stepped back, and Teresa felt something in her chest that she had no name for: relief and pride and a fierce, protective love for this cold, dangerous man who had just, for the sake of a 9-year-old, chosen not to be what everyone had made him. The agents went to work on the door. It took 20 minutes and a call to someone with the override codes Ferro's own corruption had, ironically, put on record. And when the steel door finally swung open, Giacomo Ferro was sitting in a leather chair inside his little steel cell. Immaculate, composed, his silver cane across his knees, and he looked at the agents and past them at Vincent, and he smiled. "Vincenzo," he said, "you disappoint me. I expected you to come in shooting. Your father would have." He rose slowly, with great dignity. "This is the mistake, you know, right here. You should have killed me, because I have 30 years of friends in this city, and a courtroom is a very long road with a great many doors, and old men like me have keys to all of them." He held out his frail wrists to the agent with the handcuffs, still smiling at Vincent. "I will be home before your son's next birthday, and then—" "No," Vincent said, "you won't." He said it with such absolute quiet certainty that even Ferro paused. "The tape's already copied to 6 places," Vincent went on. "The ledgers are with 3 separate offices in 2 states, and a journalist you can't buy because she hates everyone equally. The captains have seen the entry about my father. Every man who loved Vittorio Castellano now knows you had him killed. You don't have 30 years of friends anymore, Giacomo. You have 30 years of men who just found out you murdered someone they loved and lied to their faces about it for 12 years. Vincent stepped close and dropped his voice so it was almost gentle. "You're not going home. Not because of a courtroom. Because there's no one left out here who'd have you. I didn't need the bullet. I just needed everyone to know." The smile finally, slowly, died on the old man's face, and Teresa watched Giacomo Ferro understand, at last, that he had lost. The old Don Alberto died 11 days later, in his bed on Long Island, with his daughter's hand in his, and his grandson asleep in a chair by the window. He went easily at the end. He'd held on, Teresa was sure of it, long enough to know it was over, long enough to hear from her own mouth that the man who'd driven her into exile was caught, that Vincent knew the truth, that the boy was safe and had a father at last. She told him all of it in the last lucid hour, and the old man had wept and gripped her hand and said the thing she'd waited 10 years to hear. "I should have made you tell him," Alberto whispered, "that night, when you came to me crying and asked me to hide you. I should have gone to Vincent and put you both in a room and made you talk. But I was afraid. Ferro's man had frightened you so badly, and you were carrying, and I chose your safety over your happiness. I chose to hide you instead of to fight for you." His eyes swam. "Forgive an old coward, Teresa. I stole 10 years from all of you because I was afraid." "There's nothing to forgive, Papa." She kissed his cold hand. "You kept us alive. Everything else we can build back, but we couldn't build anything if we were dead." She held his gaze. "You didn't steal the years. Ferro did. You just did the only thing a frightened father could think to do to save his child." "I understand it now. I'm a parent too. I'd have done anything. I did do anything. She smiled through her tears. We're the same, you and me. We hid the people we loved because we didn't know how to fight for them. But it's over now. No more hiding. For any of us. He died that night, and Vincent came, and he stood at the foot of the bed of the man who had smuggled his lover away, and he did not rage. He bowed his head, and later Teresa found him alone in the hall, and he said, "He was like a father to me once, before all this. He taught me to skip stones, and when I lost you, he was the one man who could have told me the truth, and didn't. And I hated him for it for 1 hour tonight. And then I looked at Matteo, asleep in that chair, and I understood. He was afraid for his child. I'd burn the world down for mine." He looked at her. How can I hate a man for the exact thing I'd have done? They buried Don Alberto Marchetti on a grey morning, and half the underworld came, because in the end he'd been a good man in a bad world, which is the hardest thing to be. And the other thing that everyone came to see, though no one said it aloud, was the resurrection of the Castellano family, because the Ice King stood at the graveside not alone and frozen as he'd stood for 10 years, but with a woman on his arm and a boy at his side, and the whole city could read the message in it. The line did not die, the house did not fall, and the man who tried to hollow it out is gone. Giacomo Ferro was arraigned in federal court the same week. The tape did what Vincent had promised it would do. It didn't just convict a man, it detonated a structure. Judges resigned. 2 commission seats emptied overnight. A dozen quiet arrangements that had strangled the city for 30 years came apart in the light. Ferro, 73 and abandoned, would die awaiting the end of a trial that would outlast him, in a cell, in the dark, which was the one thing he had spent his whole life avoiding. Irrelevance. It was, Vincent said, a better punishment than a bullet, and Teresa believed him, though some nights she still saw Salvatore's face and wondered about the strange arithmetic of justice. How the man who'd repented at the end had died on a carpet, and the man who never repented at all got to die slowly in a bed. That's the thing about this world, Vincent told her one night on the penthouse terrace, the city glittering below them. It was never fair. It was never going to be fair. The best you can do is get your own people out of it clean. He turned to her. Which is what I'm going to do. I've been talking to the captains. I'm changing things, pulling the family out of the worst of it, going legitimate where I can, over years, carefully, so that when Matteo grows up, there's a name for him to inherit that isn't drenched in blood. He took her hand. I don't want him to be what I am. I want him to be what I might have been if Ferro had never gotten to my father. He'll be better than both of us, Teresa said. He asks why ponds don't freeze in the middle. He's going to be a scientist or a builder or something that makes things instead of breaking them. And we're going to let him. Vincent lifted her hand and kissed it, and then he didn't let it go. The city breathed beneath them. 10 years and 2 graves and a war lay behind them. You said something, he murmured, in a field at dawn, before I drove off to end this. You said you never stopped, that you loved me now. I remember. You said it
while I was leaving to maybe die, which was cheating because it meant I couldn't answer properly. His grip tightened. So I'm answering now, with nowhere to run and nothing left to fight. Teresa Marchetti. His voice roughened. I never stopped either. Not for 1 hour of 10 years, and I'm not going to spend one more day of my life pretending I did.
They went back to Sicily in the autumn. Not to hide this time, never again to hide, but because Teresa wanted Vincent to see it. The villa outside Cefalù, the stone terrace above the sea, the place where she'd raised his son on borrowed years, where she'd read the letter that called her home, where she'd built a small, quiet life out of the wreckage of the big, loud one. This is where he learned to swim, she said, walking Vincent along the shore in the gold evening light, while Matteo ran ahead of them, tanned and shrieking, chasing the surf. That cove there, he was 5. He was fearless. He still is. It terrifies me. And that's the market, where Signora Bruno taught him to haggle in Sicilian. And up there, she pointed to the terrace, small and white against the darkening hill, that's where I stood the day the letter came, where I decided to bring him back to you, even though I thought you hated me, even though I thought I might be walking us both into a grave. Vincent stopped walking. He looked at the villa and the sea and the boy and the woman, and Teresa watched him take the measure of the 10 years he'd lost and the life she'd built in them. And she saw him make peace with it. Not forget it, never that, but fold it into himself and carry it. Thank you for showing me, he said. I needed to see where he was all that time. It was a hole in me, not knowing. Now, when I imagine his childhood, I can see it, the cove, the market, this impossible light. He looked at her. It's beautiful here. I understand why you didn't come back sooner. If I'd washed up somewhere this beautiful, with him, I might never have left either. That night they had dinner on the terrace, the 3 of them, under a sky so thick with stars it looked spilt. Matteo talked the whole time, about school in New York, which he loved, about the tutor Vincent had hired who was teaching him to code, about whether it was true that his father owned a nightclub, and if so, could he please see it? Absolutely not, said both parents at once, and then laughed at themselves. And Teresa watched her son, whole and safe, and lit from within by the simple fact of having 2 parents at one table. And she thought her heart might not be able to hold it all. After the boy was asleep, she and Vincent stood at the terrace rail, where the story had, in a sense, begun. The moon had risen over the water, enormous, low, golden, laying a road of light across the Black Sea toward the horizon. The Sicilian moon. The one she'd stood under 100 nights, alone, wondering about the man across the ocean who thought she'd abandoned him. Vincent came up behind her and wrapped his arms around her, and she leaned back into him, and for a long moment neither of them spoke. There was nothing chasing them now. No plane to catch, no traitor to unmask, no war to survive. Just the sea and the moon, and the 2 of them, and the boy asleep inside. 10 years ago, Vincent said quietly against her hair, I fell asleep next to you in a penthouse and woke up in a world where you'd vanished. I spent a decade turning myself into ice so I wouldn't have to feel it. His arms tightened, and I swore, in the coldest part of myself, that if I ever got you back, however impossible that was, I'd never let there be 1 inch of distance between us again.
No secrets, no oceans, no man in a mask on a terrace deciding our lives for us.
He turned her in his arms so she faced him, and in the moonlight his grey eyes were not cold at all. They were the eyes she'd fallen in love with at 19, warm and wanting, and hers. So I'm going to ask you something I should have asked 10 years ago, before any of them could get between us. He let her go, just far enough to reach into his pocket, and Teresa's breath caught because she knew before she saw it, what he was holding. It was the ring. The ring. The one she'd carried in her pocket for a week, too afraid to wear, that she'd left behind in the penthouse the night she fled. The one she'd assumed was lost or sold or thrown into the river a decade ago. "You kept it," she whispered.
I kept it. He held it up, and it caught the moon. For 10 years, in a drawer I couldn't open and couldn't throw away. Every man who worked for me thought I was mourning a dead woman. I let them think it, because the truth, that I was keeping a ring for a woman I'd sworn to hate, on the impossible chance she'd come back, the truth would have made me look weak. His mouth curved. Turns out, it just made me a man in love who wouldn't admit it, which is the same thing, I suppose. He went down on one knee, there on the stone terrace above the Sicilian Sea, under the enormous golden moon, and Teresa put both hands over her mouth, and the tears came, and she didn't fight them. "Teresa Marchetti," Vincent said, "mother of my son. The one thing 10 years of ice couldn't kill. Marry me."
In the light this time, where the whole world can see, so no one ever again gets to decide our story but us. His voice broke, just slightly. The great, cold dawn of Manhattan undone at last. "Say yes, and I'll spend the rest of my life keeping every promise I couldn't keep before." "Yes," she said, and she was laughing and crying at once as he slid the ring onto her finger where it should have been for a decade. "Yes, God, yes, in the light, every day of it, yes." He rose and kissed her, slow and deep and unhurried, because for the first time in 10 years there was no clock, no threat, no reason on earth to stop. And above them, the moon poured its gold across the water, and inside the villa, their son slept safe, and somewhere across an ocean, a cold empire was slowly, carefully turning warm. And on a small stone terrace in Sicily, a woman who had spent 10 years hiding, and a man who had spent 10 years freezing, finally, at long last, came out into the light together, and stayed there. Some promises made under the Sicilian moon are stronger than any oath sworn in the dark. Theirs was one.